Hello, friends. How are you doing? I am super, super excited to bring you our next episode with an awesome colleague, professional friend, Pasha. And I will get
Hey,
into all of him, his credentials and accolades. Actually, Pasha, I'm going to let you explain it. But Pasha and I have been working together for quite some time now. He is an absolutely brilliant mind. He helps with marketing efforts, and that's a pretty broad statement there, but we'll go into the weeds and the details of that. And I feel like when we combine our forces with sales efforts, marketing efforts, and operations, it's just transformation of businesses at the highest level of consulting at the end of the day. So, super excited to have you, Pasha. Welcome. Oh, you're on mute, Pasha.
sorry. I was gonna say I haven't been on one of these in a while, and that shows with the mute button, but no, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So, today's episode is proven strategies for scaling marketing and sales efforts. And I wanted to keep it broad because Pasha and I have been working for the past couple of years together on a bunch of different consulting projects. And I think what we bring to the table is really unique. We see it in our client work every day and every week that we've been working together, but I wanted to share this with a larger audience. So, Pasha, before we get into any questions, can you just introduce yourself, give our folks some background about you, and share any details you want to?
Yeah, so I'm Pash Irshad, co-founder of Shape and Scale. I've probably got about 16 years in the industry, and that industry would be B2B. I've pretty much worked across marketing and ops for that time, kind of cut my teeth in technical project management, website project management, mobile app development. So that was in the era where mobile apps were a thing. I mean, they still are, but not to the extent that they were back then. And then segued really into just B2B demand and lead generation. So I was VP of digital at a B2B agency, serving clients like Samsung and Microsoft, all the way down to SaaS startups like a Databricks or a Tableau. Over those years, learned a lot. And so kind of took those learnings with my co-founder, Suzanne Block, who heads up the tech PR part of our business, and created Shape and Scale. So I've been in business 2.5 years, HubSpot Gold Partner. Today, I'm really focused on helping our clients orchestrate their go-to-market through HubSpot. That obviously involves ops. And I do look at things from, I think, more of a marketing lens, but have been working with sales teams probably, for the last 12 years, I think. Um, Something we were doing early in our career was just getting feedback directly from sales, talking to sales teams in order to make our programs really, kind of excel in a way that led to more cohesive collaboration between the two departments.
Amazing. And I love that. I feel like when you combine your marketing and MOPS prowess, and then you bring in me and some other folks that we've been working on some projects together with sales and customer success and expansion business, it's just to me like the sky's the limit of what we can do to transform a business at the end of the day. And I think this is what I would call growth at the end of the day. And I think it's a broad umbrella term, but just talk to us about marketing because I come from a background of magazines, digital advertising, sales, and I have kind of a POV on what I think marketing is, but let me hear it from the expert. There's so many facets of marketing these days. So, what is that? And then, how do you kind of segment that out into the work that we do?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, like I came up in the era of lead generation. That was before demand gen was a thing. And so in that, I think I learned a lot about what to do and what not to do. Obviously, we still have the same debates, I think, today that we did 10 to 12 years ago, which is MQLs and lead generation versus demand generation and brand building. And I think really all of that is great, but it comes down to understanding again, this is super cliche. I find it very hard to talk about this without feeling like I'm just repeating things that have been said over and over again. But it rings
That's
true
okay.
that, yeah, I mean, I think it rings true that it's just all about understanding your customer, why they buy from you, and then building a customer journey that where like you have a cohesive strategy that takes them from unaware to most aware and kind of fills that in between, right? Like the reality is today, consumers, B2B purchasing people with B2B purchasing power are doing most of their research before they even talk to a salesperson.
Yes.
They have more content than ever before. If anything, too much content. They've got a myriad of touch points, and people making purchasing decisions have a broader purview, right? That budget needs to be spread across a lot of different things. So when you mix all those in together, you're not going to really win unless you do actually have a cohesive strategy that you see through. So to me, that's really what marketing is. Um, it's getting your message in front of customers to help them solve their jobs to be done, and then giving them everything that they kind of need to make the decision, and ensuring that when sales gets them, sales, I think, has what they need. Um, Not only to, I would say, close the deal, but just to make the best use of their time, right? So we're not working a ton of unqualified leads. So we're not having to constantly ask for enablement materials. I think there needs to really be a marriage there where that kind of handoff is happens in a way that has the least friction possible.
Yeah, and I so believe in that, and I feel like a lot of it comes back to ICP, which we were just talking to before we got on camera, and customer journey mapping, which Pasha has an amazing framework of how to kind of do this. And we've walked some clients through ICP workshop and customer journey mapping. And I think what I find is it's the basics and the building blocks of marketing at the end of the day, but there's an evolution to what that looks like too as companies grow and scale from 5 million to 15 million and 15 to 30 and 30 to 50 and so on. And I find that folks don't go back to the basics as they grow and mature as a company at the end of the day because they're like, oh, our ICP is defined. Oh, that's great. But now you've added in three new product lines, or your customer has moved from more like an SMB segment to more of an enterprise segment, or you've gone up market, down market, whatever it is. And they don't really go back to the basics to reiterate, revise their sort of go to market strategy and specifically the foundations of marketing. What do you think about that? Because I know that's something we see across a lot of our projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think the basics, I would say, get lost often. And coming off inbound 24 last week, I mean, everything's about AI. And if we just walked the client through kind of like, Copilot Breeze or Breeze Copilot, like what that means for the organization. But I think the caveat's always like, you've kind of got to crawl before you walk. And so for a lot of clients across marketing, sales, success, the same problems are going to come up over and over again, right? That's one, lack of communication in between departments. That's dirty
Huge.
databases. That's friction for the customer across the buying journey. And it sounds like really, again, I don't want to use the word cliche, but all of this sounds like very rudimentary. But I think the more clients and for me, as I see, you'll find that the basics generally aren't there, right? So starting with the basics.
Surprising, almost shocking, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many different compounding factors that go into that. You could talk about them for days, but I think just getting back to basics and understanding your customer journey, understanding the sales process, understanding post sale, understanding all of those mechanisms, how they work together, a shared taxonomy of what's important to the company, like getting those things done and done in a way that kind of aligns the organization is probably one of the most powerful things you can do. And that doesn't really, that you don't need AI to do that. You don't need a CRM to do that. You don't really
Nope.
need much. So
I agree. I almost think of You said so many good things already, but I almost think of marketing as there's brand marketing, you got the demand generation, you got the marketing ops, you got the systems, you got the automation, you have the whole social fuel, and then I would say all those like company materials you talked about, whether it's for sales or white papers or click for demos or find out some more about us before you get on the phone with us. There's so many facets of it. And then I think the days of the silos between sales and marketing, like we see it all the time, if they're not working together in unison, they have that shared taxonomy, they have the agreement of the customer journey and the ICP, that's when things start falling through the cracks. And I think cracks can be small or cracks can be big, but I think these small cracks become much larger as companies grow and scale from a revenue perspective. And then as they add more layers onto their company, it gets more complicated. So the days where we bring everyone together across multiple departments and multiple stakeholders, I think that's when you have the most impact on the organization at the end of the day. And that's what I find so much fun in consulting work at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'd also say like just with tenures at these companies are shorter and shorter. Like when I started my career, I felt like you had a good 3 year runway to like get things done. Generally now you'll see people stay at a company six years to a month, often a leadership position. So it's like if you compare it to an NFL team, it's like changing the offensive playbook every year, right? Like you come in and you've got a new playbook and you need new team members to support that. And that's like just what I would call like if you think about process debt and how that accumulates across teams, obviously you have to look at the workforce and how people are coming in and out, different consultants, different people. Um, and I think like that's not to lay blame at anybody's feet. I think people do the best that they can with information at any given time. And so they're making decisions based in that vacuum. It's always easy for me to come in or you to come in and like basically say, hey, this stuff wasn't done right. But I think like having an empathetic lens for the organization is really important. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I think one of our biggest successes is that we both do have an empathetic lens. Like, we're like, hey, we can come in and change the methodology, but it's not just changing the methodology. Is it how did we get there? Why did we get here? Where do we want to go as a business at the end of the day? And I would say also what's possible within the confines of the structure of the business. Is the business getting sold? Is the new leadership coming in? Did someone just new come in and they have a certain philosophy about how they run the business or reporting or how they report to the board? So I think it's coming in with our expertise and lens, but also being mindful that you're still working in a company and a container, and there are challenges and obstacles that go within that company at the end of the day that we need to work in. And I think being empathetic and then obviously having the clients trust us at the end of the day, I think as we can see with some of our projects, that's a huge lens. Once we get in and do an audit and a couple months in and they start trusting us, it's been, oh, what else can you guys do for us? Because they realize that not only can we truly transform the business, we can explain it, we can help them do it, we can show them, and then eventually we would leave right at the end of the day
yeah,
and they'd be able to manage it themselves.
I would agree.
Exactly. And then I want to just touch on, you said a few things about lack of comms or lack of communication. I feel like that is a big thing. I feel like when you're talking sales and marketing teams at the end of the day, I think the sales leader and the marketing leader and whoever else is in that leadership, whether it's the CEO, president, CFO, etc. I think there needs to be conversations that are happening all the time at those levels. I feel like emails we know don't work. There's a lot of room for translation. What did you mean? What does this say? So I think getting everyone on the phone or video is really important at the end of the day. And I think in order to not play this game of telephone, I think we do a really good job of bringing the stakeholders and multiple departments together at the end of the day. And that 1 hour we spend, even if it's 6 or 15 people on a call, is so much more impactful than a 20 chain sort of email at the end of the day. What's your POV on some of that? I know we do a lot of looms and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think getting people in the same room is important and making sure everybody is singing from the same choir sheet. I mean, I think a lot of the times different departments are moving very fast and they basically have their own kind of guidelines and they have their own responsibilities. So it does start to become like that's just the nature of humans. It can start to feel very adversarial. I feel like when you and I have gotten people in those conversations, you'll find that there's like really a good amount of common ground and more
Yes.
understanding, which I think again leads to like an empathetic view in inside and outside, right? And I think I keep going back to the word empathy, but I think it's important to note just in the context of what we do that they're that keeping that lens and kind of showing different teams why things are occurring helps to increase empathy inside an organization, right? Once you have that, I think you can it's easier to kind of build on a framework that's easily repeatable, where there's more kind of cohesion in between different departments.
Yeah, exactly. And then you also mentioned two other points which I'll bring up. You said friction from the customer. I think that's a big one. I think there's sort of like internal plays and there's external plays. And at the end of the day, if internally you're feeling the heat and the squeeze, probably externally you're getting the heat from the powers that be, whether it's the executives, board members, or even the clients are complaining. So I think mapping out that customer journey and sort of understanding what that looks like at the end of the day, I think that's huge because the plays internal and external, while maybe similar, different things happen behind the scenes. I think the customer needs to feel like, okay, I want to buy this. I understand why I'm buying this. This solves like a really solid like pain for me. And then what is my experience going to be with that customer? Because I think at the end of the day, with tech, especially, things get really sticky and it's hard to sort of untangle things. So it's like, how do you make it that the customer feels like, hey, we got you and we understand your pain and we've got this process at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's good friction and bad friction. I'm definitely like not the first person to have said that. Like HubSpot's RevOps training mentions it. I'm reading a book by his name is Doug Davidoff, Revenue Acceleration Framework. He talks a lot about the friction. But yeah, I think there's good and bad friction. You know, bad friction is, hey, I can't find your pricing, or hey, I reached out for a demo and it's been 2 days. And there's good friction where there's guardrails where, you know, perhaps a customer is too early in the process, right? And they don't need to speak to somebody to get a demo. And that's where your content strategy should have the resources that they need for where they're at in the journey. For instance, like if you have a blog with a CTA that leads to a demo, is that really like, I think
What they're
that's,
looking for.
yeah, as opposed to having perhaps a CTA to, like another resource related, right? Like almost putting the guardrail and not letting them talk to you right away because there should be an understanding that there's more information that needs to be gathered, and people generally don't go to blogs unless it's on the bottom of the funnel or high intent to like get sold, I guess is what I'm saying. So
Yeah, and I mean, I think that once they book that demo and you got on the phone with sales, I always tell my sales folks is like, I know you have stages and there's deals and opportunities, and you have to go through discovery and all this stuff. But I'm always just like, meet the customer where they are at the end of the day. If they have a really specific pain point or they want to see a very specific thing about your product, you don't need to do this whole like dog and pony like sales show at the end of the day. Lead with what they're asking, show them what they need to make a clear decision, and then you can always show them all the other great stuff. But I always say meet them where you are, not force them sort of into your funnel for sales. Meet them where they want to be in the buyer cycle, and start there. And if they have to skip steps or skip hoops because they read 25 of your blog posts, that's okay. That means they're probably
yeah.
farther down the cycle and are quicker to buy at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of a funnel is probably outdated just considering how buyers, do their research and where they get their content from. I think, yeah, that's probably one thing in marketing that maybe have like some people still, use the funnel, but I think thinking of your customers in a funnel is probably a little bit outdated.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I like the, winning by design bow tie method. And then I always talk about like RevUp Advisory, this like conveyor belt methodology that
Yeah.
everything marketing, sales, customer success, product does informs each other. It becomes a circular loop at the end of the day. And so you're getting feedback from all these different points. They obviously need to move into some sort of system so that could be shared and disseminated across the organization at the end of the day. And then it's like, internally, what are you actually doing with those data points, like an NPS survey, and how are you going to evolve your service, or what does that look like at the end of the day?
Yeah, totally agree.
And then the other point you mentioned was dirty data, which I know it's basically every company at this point. I would say data is never perfect, I don't think, at the end of the day. But any guardrails or guidelines you think around data? How could you keep it clean? Maybe HubSpot specific examples. What do you think around that? Because I know that always is a big one because we're putting in reporting at the end of the day. And if you can't trust the reporting because the data is dirty, then it's really hard to see, the insights at the end of the day for the business.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of twofold. There's probably like the very tactical, like, hey, we have missing fields and we don't have email addresses, and I would just say holes in the data. But then there's also the why behind reporting. So I think a lot of clients will often be like, hey, I want to see like these 5 reports, and you don't necessarily even have you don't have the data to populate those, right? Like you might want to see a very clean conversion report from subscriber all the way down to closed one, but if you're not automating those life cycle stages, you're going to see a lot of holes, right? So that's just one example. Like, you might need to put in place that automation. Do you get to the point where you trust that conversion and that kind of funnel data from a report perspective? And then I think from, just like an admin perspective in HubSpot, it's one, having a mechanism to identify where the holes are in the data. We usually install a data clean dashboard for our clients. We usually install InCycle. It just depends. If you have Ops Hub, there's workflows you can put in. But one is being able to clearly illustrate where the holes in the data are, and then putting in place a process to fix and clean those. Obviously, the more integrations that you have, the more bidirectional syncs that you have, the more problems that you have, right? So we always see the old like Apollo integrated into HubSpot. You push a lot of, you push a ton of data in there, becomes a lot of offline sources. Some are marketing contacts, some are not. And all of a sudden you go from having 1,000 contacts in your database to now having 5,000. And, it just becomes a mess. And that just happens and is compounded over time with the more tools that you get. So I think like,
Yeah.
if I had to up level that into three kind of main points, it's one is just like understanding and identifying a process to identify and resolve data issues. I think the
Yes,
second one is
huge.
understanding the why behind your reporting and what's required to get there, because that doesn't really have anything to do with data as much as it does the mechanisms to get that data to a place where it can be reported on, and making sure it answers the questions that you need. And then I think the third one is just from your tech stack, like always understanding where your data is coming from, where is it going, are you cleaning it, do you have a data where, I mean, all those questions, right? So I think those three things are an efficient way, or is at least a starting point that I use with our clients.
Yep, I agree. And I think what I hear is we ask a lot of questions at the end of the day. And I think as good consultants, we ask a lot of why questions because at the end of the day, tactically, you can do essentially all these things with the right
Mhm.
tools, with the right people. But I think what is a unique differentiator of us is why do you want to see this report? What impact does it have on the business? Why do you do it a certain way? And I mean, we've seen bad consulting work where they're just like, hey, we want to integrate these systems. Okay, we're going to go in and just integrate the systems. But like, what does that mean for the business? What does that mean for the sales team? What does that mean for the marketing team? And I think there's a lot of what I call this like lift and shift. People are like, oh, shiny penny, new system. We're going to just move this from here to there. But they never really think about, I think of this as like a ball of yarn, how it's all like interwoven at the end of the day. And I think we think at such a higher level of how this impacts the different departments, how this impacts the business, how this impacts the C suite, how this impacts the board. And then we can obviously tactically implement, that's no problem. But it's like, why are we even doing this at the end of the day? And I think that's missing in a lot of consulting work at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a piece of it. A big piece of it is asking the right questions and kind of trying to figure out, sometimes it's reverse engineering why things were done. I think that that usually is where I tend to spend a lot of my time.
Yes, exactly. And then I feel like, how do you sort of keep up to date? I feel like this marketing and sales and sort of operations to me, it's like ever changing, ever evolving. I know you've been a great resource for me. You've shared a lot of awesome tech tools. I think you're naturally curious. You really like to learn. Where do you go for information?
Yeah, it's changed over the years. I would say my number one channel now is probably Substack. Like I probably spend, I don't know, I spend a good $125 a month subscribing to the right people because I think to me that's just like, it's investing in my own education. So I think Substack's probably my number one place for learnings. Second would be LinkedIn, much as I like to hate on
Love and
LinkedIn,
hate
I've been on there
it.
a lot. Yeah, I still learn a ton. And I think it's not just learning a lot, it's just figuring out who are the people that really kind of like know their stuff. I mentioned the book by Doug Davidoff. I followed him for a long time. He's been in the business 20 years. Wrote a really great book. I started last night. I'm just like, wow, this is great. Obviously communities. So I'm in a good amount of Slack and WhatsApp communities. We both taken the Winning by Design course. I'm generally always upskilling. And then probably Reddit. I do a decent amount on Reddit, get a lot of information from there. And then, I mean, for me, one thing I'm trying to double down on is just being more active in the HubSpot community. So they have their community online and like, I mean, there's just always different use cases in there. And so just like getting smart on that, I'm trying to be better about actually answering questions instead of looking for them. So I would say and then I read a lot. I try to read as much as I can. Not probably not as much as I'd like as of late, because I think a lot of business books all start to sound the same.
So, I agree.
But yeah, but where I can reading. So that's actually a lot. And it's a lot to keep up with, right? It's
Yeah,
it's
a
it's
lot.
just it's hard.
Yeah, I feel like I've always been into Substack. I feel like you got me more into Substack. I feel like I recently have gone down some Reddit, threads, I guess they're called. Sometimes I feel like it's good information. Sometimes I feel like it's nonsense. I think and then obviously business books are obviously great. But I think it's figuring out who has really interesting stuff to say. I think figuring out who has not just interesting stuff to say, but also has practically implemented and put that into actual businesses at the end of the day, because it's great to talk about things in theory and say, oh, this is a great methodology, but have you done it? And sort of what are the pros and cons? And I know we've had that conversation earlier this week. So I think that's really important. And I think obviously community is really great. And I'm continuing to like up level and find like the right communities. So I love that answer. Um, any sort of tools, tech stack pieces, I feel like you have seen that are new. I was looking at some like AI video tool that I saw this morning, and I was like, oh, this could be cool because I know LinkedIn's pushing out a lot of video these days. Any tech tools? I feel like you have so many really at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I have my core that I can't live without. For me, that's going to be Claude, ChatGPT, Fireflies for audio recording, obviously Notion for documentation, Apple Notes, Get Matter, which is a reader app where I kind of save everything. I try
I
to,
like that.
I, yeah, I would say that's for like my own personal tools. Those are probably the ones I'm using, and then obviously HubSpot, which I tend to live in. For myself and clients. Outside of that, there's so many. I definitely try to keep abreast of them, and obviously being in HubSpot, like at Inbound last week, there's like there's just so many, right? Each category has so many different players. I really think it's just to me, I'm more on a less is more kick as of right now. So
I
for our
agree.
own, like I'm trying to do, you know, trying to do more with less. And I think for clients as well, there's just so many times I come in and it's like they've got, you know, s- again, while I
So
think
many tools that are duplicative at the same time, I feel like.
duplicative, or are they even utilizing it to the best of their ability? I think what
No.
HubSpot allows you to do, it's like, okay, you can get form routing tool, or you can get, conversational intelligence tool, or you can just, use what HubSpot has. Well, it might not be best in class. It's all in the same database.
Right.
And it's all part of the same ecosystem. So it's like starting with that. And then once you outgrow it, bringing something else on. But a lot of things I think become unproven. It's shiny object syndrome. You get it on, and then you've just muddied the waters that much more. So, and again, I think in some cases, yeah, like while I'm a HubSpot partner, I'm realistic. Like they're not always going to have the best necessarily in class for maybe if you need something for like chatbots, right? But I think that's just an
Right.
organizational decision. But really, with the average B2B company having like 25 to 35 tools, like it starts to get pretty crazy.
It's bonkers at the end of the day. And I feel like then it's how does all that data intersect and where is it flowing to and what's sort of like the nucleus, which is such a larger conversation for an organization, which I know we help facilitate, but I often don't even know that companies have that documentation, have that diagram at the end of the day, or even understand it because someone over here in marketing bought something and someone over here in sales bought something and they're have separate budgets for tech stack and tools and they use it for a specific use case for their teams at the end of the day, but it's not sort of cohesively integrated across the ecosystem of the organization. So I always think that way too.
Yeah, no,
Awesome.
I agree.
So we are going to wrap. Any last words that you want to share, or how can people get in touch with you? Anything you want to share with our audience here?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm always, I'm on LinkedIn, even if I'm not posting, I'm lurking, haven't been trying to get back to 3 to 4 times a week. So we've been busy.
You can do it.
Yeah. So you can reach me on LinkedIn or shapeandscale.co. But no, that's it. I appreciate you having me on. It was fun to talk about sales and marketing and ops, and appreciate it.
Pasha, you're awesome. You are one of the brilliant minds in this ecosystem, and I super enjoy working with you and chatting with you. I feel like we push each other to a really, really high caliber of consulting work, and I just want to publicly thank you for that. So you're awesome, and we will see you soon. Thanks, everyone.